Have you ever experienced a moment when, faced with a severe insult, a toxic move, or a massive provocation, you didn't utter a single word and remained completely impassive? In that very instant, as you chose silence over anger, you felt in that cold chill that all control and invisible power had shifted entirely into your hands. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "It is the stillest words that bring the storm. Thoughts that come on dove's feet guide the world."
Reactivity is not weakness or cowardice. It is the most lethal weapon and the highest strategy, one that paralyzes the opponent's mind and drowns them in their own moves. While most people expose all their cards by venting their rage, history's most brilliant leaders built empires by hiding behind the veil of silence. Now, let me take you back 2,000 years into the dark, conspiracy-ridden Senate corridors of Rome, into the mind of Caesar Augustus, the man who used silence like a whip. When Julius Caesar was assassinated, the streets of Rome bled with chaos. When Caesar's will was opened, the name he adopted and left his entire fortune to shocked everyone. Octavian, the future Augustus, an 18-year-old, sickly, frail youth with zero military experience. Rome's towering generals and ruthless politicians viewed this young boy as easy prey to be devoured instantly. But Octavian, instead of drawing his sword and shouting threats like other ambitious leaders, made his first masterstroke of strategy. He remained silent. He armored himself in silence to mask his vulnerability and force his enemies to reveal their true intentions.
Mark Antony, Rome's most powerful and hot-tempered general, seized every opportunity to provoke and humiliate this inexperienced youth, to rob him of Caesar's legacy. Antony roared in public squares, incited the masses, and hurled insults at Octavian. Yet young Octavian never responded with anger. He maintained absolute composure and simply observed. His utter impassivity bred a deep unease and fear in Antony's mind. What is this boy planning? When anger finds no friction, it consumes itself. Octavian had unbalanced his enemy before even making a single move.
As Octavian built relationships with Cicero, Rome's greatest orator, and its wealthy tyrants, he never whispered grand promises. He merely listened. While everyone tried to decipher his thoughts, he absorbed their weaknesses, ambitions, and fears like a sponge. As Nietzsche observed, those who make noise merely exhaust their own presence, whereas Octavian gained ground with quiet steps. The senators believed he was a mere pawn, but behind the scenes, he had already arranged every piece on the chessboard. Silence was his sweetest poison, lulling his enemies into fatal complacency.
When the era of the triumvirate began, dividing Rome among three major leaders, Octavian sat at the same table with his rivals. While Mark Antony and Lepidus engaged in displays of power and carved up borders, Octavian stared at the map with cold, emotionless eyes. He allowed his rivals to boil over in their ambition, patiently waiting for them to stumble. When necessary, he drafted ruthless death lists, executing thousands of opponents with the stroke of a pen in a single night, doing so without delivering a speech or showing a shred of emotion. His stoic silence elevated his cruelty into myth.
Octavian never repeated the mistake that got Caesar declared dictator and stabbed to death. Whenever he was offered grand titles, royal crowns, or divine powers, he turned them down with a posture of supreme modesty. "I am merely a citizen, the first servant of Rome," he declared, blinding the Senate to his true reach. True power does not shout, nor is it written on billboards. Octavian gathered all authority while appearing to demand nothing. He mastered the philosophy of holding absolute power while remaining invisible. When Mark Antony fell under the spell of Queen Cleopatra of Egypt and abandoned Roman values, Octavian still did not raise his voice. He quietly seized Antony's secret will and had it read aloud in the Senate with cold detachment. He used no hate speech. He simply laid the facts and Antony's own blunders before the Roman people. While Antony succumbed to rage and lust, Octavian shaped public opinion like a quiet sculptor. Reactivity was absent, making his moral high ground seem unshakable.
When Antony and Cleopatra's fleet collapsed at the Battle of Actium, Octavian let out no cries of triumph. As his rivals committed suicide, he claimed Egypt as the personal property of Rome, yet held no ostentatious celebrations. Upon returning to Rome, he was as calm as if he were returning from a casual stroll rather than a war. His enemies were destroyed, and the world lay at his feet. Yet he remained the same cold, unreachable, and mysterious Octavian. Even absolute victory could not shatter the quiet fortress of his mind. In 27 BC, the Senate granted this composed young man the title Augustus, meaning the revered one. Though the Roman Republic appeared to continue on paper, it was now a vast empire ruled by the singular will of one man. Even upon achieving absolute power, Augustus refused to wear a crown, styling himself merely as princeps, first citizen. This was precisely the profound philosophy Nietzsche pointed to. The greatest forms of rule are those established silently, without being felt. Augustus buried a republic in silence and erected an empire in its place. When Augustus attended Senate meetings, he would sit in the back rows, listening to debates from start to finish without intervening. Senators would argue and shout for hours, terrified as they glanced at the expressionless mask on Augustus's face. Finally, Augustus would stand up, utter a few short, precise sentences, and conclude the meeting. All those noisy speeches crumbled beneath a single silent glance and concise word from the emperor. It was impossible to manipulate or defeat a man who never raised his voice.
The Parthian Empire, Rome's greatest adversary, had captured Roman battle standards years earlier, trampling Roman pride. The Roman public demanded a bloody war of revenge, the streets echoing with cries for battle. Augustus massed his legions on the border, but didn't fire a single arrow. He simply waited, exerting silent pressure through the back corridors of diplomacy. Unable to withstand the crushing weight of this silence, the Parthian king returned the standards without a single casualty. Augustus had won his greatest military diplomatic victory through a silent game of intimidation.
Augustus's impassivity was wielded not only against foreign enemies, but with equal ruthlessness against his own family. When his daughter Julia violated Roman morality laws and became embroiled in scandals, Augustus threw no public tantrums. He exiled his daughter to a desolate, dark island and never spoke her name again. He buried his grief as a father, without showing the world a single crack, knowing an emperor had no right to emotional outbursts. His total lack of reaction transformed even his personal tragedies into displays of strength.
There was only one moment in his life when Augustus lost his detachment. In 9 AD, when 3 Roman legions were annihilated by Germanic tribes in the Teutoburg forest. The aging Augustus paced the corridors of his palace for days, beating his head against the walls, shouting, "Quintilli vare, legiones rede, Quintilius varus, give me back my legions." For the first time in his life, he lost control and made noise. This moment exposed his humanity, but also revealed how vulnerable he became whenever he abandoned his silence. His mask had fallen, yet the empire stood firm, sustained by the silent system he had constructed.
Augustus never punished spies or courtiers who brought him vicious rumours or insults whispered about him in the palace. "Let them talk," he would say. "What matters is not what they say, but what they are capable of doing." By refusing to respond to slander, he allowed it to die on its own. To answer an insult is to grant value to the insulter. By remaining silent, Augustus rendered all his enemies irrelevant. Silence is the ultimate antidote to gossip and hatred.
Augustus found Rome a city of bricks and left it a city of marble. But he accomplished this not through colossal statues of himself, but by altering the soul of the city. He did not carve his name boastfully across every building, temple, and monument. He prioritized elegance and order. By patronizing poets and artists like Horace and Virgil, he subtly transformed Roman culture with his philosophy. Power was injected into society not through a harsh tone of voice, but through the quiet aesthetic of architecture, art, and order.
When Nietzsche's philosophy intersects with Augustus's life, history's greatest psychological strategy emerges. Nietzsche defines a person's mastery over themselves as self-control. Augustus forged that self-control into an imperial weapon. People foolishly believe that the man who shouts loudest and hurls the fiercest threats is the strongest. In truth, he is merely trying to suppress his own fear. Real power is staying in absolute silence amidst the storm and manipulating the entire world through that very impassivity. Augustus was no frontline warrior, yet his silence made warriors his servants.
In 14 AD, lying on his deathbed, he looked at his friends gathered around him and uttered one of history's most iconic final lines. "Have I played the part well? Then applaud as I exit." He had not removed that cold, strategic, impassive mask until his final breath. His entire life was a masterfully scripted theatrical performance designed to rule Rome and the world. And he brought that performance to a victorious close without wasting a single unnecessary word, carried by the artistic power of silence.
Augustus's reign of over 40 years proves a cold truth. Those who shout and fail to master their rage eventually drown in their own noise. Julius Caesar shouted and was killed. Mark Antony raged and was ruined. Augustus remained silent and ruled the world. Reactivity is the art of stripping your enemy of their greatest card, your emotions. No force on earth can overthrow a man who conceals his feelings and turns silence into a strategy.
Now, stop and look at your own life with cold objectivity. When faced with an injustice, an argument, or a provocation, do you immediately shout and expose all your cards? How many times have you surrendered control to the other side through emotional outbursts you couldn't restrain? In a world that mistakes silence for weakness, when will you realize that absolute power lies in remaining unbothered? Unless you build that unbreakable silent fortress within yourself, like Augustus, you are doomed to be swept away by the whims of others.
As Nietzsche suggested, the events that shake the world arrive on the stillest feet. Will you remain a slave to your anger and join those who make meaningless noise? Or will you grasp the power of strategic silence and become the Augustus of your own life?
The choice is yours. Either surrender to your emotions and expose your weakness, or stay silent and take absolute control. What about you? What was that one moment in your life when remaining completely impassive during a provocation allowed you to take total control? And what was the outcome? Let's discuss in the comments.